you think, Morgan? Is this political correctness gone too far?
Yeah. I mean, we have a tendency to do that anyway. I mean, you get politically correct. Stuff happens that you don't want to happen. I all of a sudden became an African. Political correctness, African American. I'm not African. I'm American. I'm not.
This is Morgan Freeman's mother, Mamie Edna Freeman. She was born in Itta Bena, Mississippi, a small town in the Mississippi Valley. Itta Bena, which was a Choctaw phrase meaning forest camp. The name of the town is a Choctaw phrase. Choctaw Indians occupied the Delta region for hundreds of years prior to the arrival of European settlers. You fucking right, Morgan Freeman. You are an American. You are a descendant of a Choctaw Indian. We know the truth now.
Y'all just wait. We're going to talk about this. So I never thought I would call Morgan Freeman a sellout. But he is. He's a sellout. And I don't understand why people... I mean, I do, to a certain extent, understand why people are so embarrassed about that epoch in history as far as Africans are concerned, and always want to deny their African heritage. Was Morgan Freeman's mother born in this area? Sure. Was this area controlled by the Choctaw? Sure. But what they failed to tell you about the Choctaw Indians, which was part of the so-called 5 civilized tribes, is that the Choctaw Indians, a century before, in the 1720s, began to purchase slaves of African descent. And they maintained the purchase of slaves of African descent all the way throughout until the end of the American Civil War. Now, when they were getting ready to move the Choctaw Indians out of Mississippi, and they did a census, they found that 14% of the population of the Choctaw Indians were of African descent, were slaves to the Choctaw. They were slaves in the same way they were to the Southerners. They were plantation field hands. They worked for them. And the Choctaw Indian government actually made it where it was illegal for a slave to carry a weapon or to marry another Choctaw person. Those things were illegal. It was also illegal for them to own land. Now, to give you more information about how the Choctaw treated their slaves, the Choctaw, even in their removal, refused to allow for the Africans who were part of the Choctaw Nation to actually have rights of Choctaw citizenship. So they weren't allowed citizenship. Therefore, when the Dawes Commission came about, those people of African descent who were Choctaw were not allowed to have the bloodline descendants, so they would not get the annuity to which the Choctaw Indians received and still are receiving because of the Choctaw government. Now, this Choctaw government, when they moved out into Texas and Oklahoma and whatnot, and the Civil War started, the Choctaw, along with the Chickasaw, allied with the Confederacy. And they allied with the Confederacy as they espoused themselves that the Confederate Constitution would protect their right to own slaves, to own the African slaves. Now, the Choctaw did at least give 40 acres to the descendants of to the African descents after the war was over, but because they weren't part of the Dawes Commission, did not get the 160 acres that bloodline under the Dawes Commission Choctaw Indians were able to acquire. They still didn't have the right to hold office. They still didn't have the right to marry other Choctaws. So they were still treated as slaves. If you ever watched the Bass Reeves show, the Lawman Bass Reeves, that's now on Paramount, you'll see in the first episode, in the first scene actually, Choctaw Indians and Chickasaw Indians were enlisted as mounted cavalry under the Confederacy. So the Choctaw fought to keep Africans as slaves. So basically, and they called them freemen, which is interesting that Morgan Freeman's name is Freeman, which is what they call them. Now, what is most interesting is how people want to tell you just this small part of the history, that his family line were Choctaw Indians, but they were slaves to the Choctaw Indians. They were from Africa. They purchased those of African descent in the same way as their white counterparts did. And guess what? All of that shit backfired on them siding with the Confederacy, because the Confederacy never truly allied with the Choctaw or the Chickasaw people. So all the rights and things that they thought that they were going to acquire went for nothing. And the main thing that they wanted to the main right that they wanted to keep in alliance with the Confederacy was the right to own African slaves. So sure, Morgan Freeman's family are part of the Choctaw Nation, which he still can't prove it through the Dawes Commission, so he ain't getting nothing from them. If they do, they'll only do it because he's a celebrity. But the average person whose family does go back to the Choctaw, you're not getting it. So this whole we were there, we were already here, and we were native, we were indigenous people, is bullshit. Read the entire history. These people bought Africans as slaves and treated them as such. And this idea that I want to drop all my African ancestry because I want to be indigenous, because I don't want to think of my people in that way, is bullshit. You're sitting up here and you are being disrespectful to those who suffered through this time frame, who still persevered through this time frame. And guess what? Every civilization has a time frame where the people lost, where your ancestors lost. But it is their perseverance. It is their ability to still be here, their ability to still fight, their ability to still prove and show that they are just as great as anybody else is what you should be holding on to. So yeah, the creator of this video is right to a certain degree, but he leaves out all the important stuff so that he can continue to push his bullshit ass narrative. I am proud that my family came from African descent. I am even proud of the very little bit of native descent that I have. But I am more proud of my African descent because at least my African descent wasn't continuing to try to buddy up to the colonizers in the same way. And yes, I know somebody's going to say there are people who were in Africa who sold slaves. This is true, but only to a certain extent. And once it was realized what was truly going on, they stopped. My Mali family, they stopped. My Nigerian family, they stopped. I'm not saying they're clean for doing it at all, because they're not. But the chattel slavery that was in America was worse than any other slavery that we know of, because of the disrespect and the dehumanization that was going on. But as far as trying to just erase that out of your family heritage, if your ass is here in America and you look like me, your ass got African descent. Stop with the bullshit. You can be proud of both sides. You don't have to disregard one in order to uplift another. That's called racism. So that's all I got to say about this bullshit. But y'all have a great day. I'm having a bummy day today. That's why I'm in a t-shirt and no hat. But, you know, hey, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations. Dumb motherfucker.